Hey, what's good, people? Billy here from Kizomba Harmony, and we are back with our next video, blog, vlog, whatever you want to call it. The topic of today's vlog is going to be the vast array of new styles of Kizomba that have become extraordinarily popular worldwide. Over the years, they've gone under different names like New Style, French Style, Urban Kiz, Urban Kizomba, Kizomba 2.0, Urban Tarasha, Tarasha Osteo. There's a lot of names for a lot of different personal styles. So for the purpose of this video, I'm just gonna call it all urban. It's just easier for me, it's easier for you. Now, I understand the irony of calling it urban when Kizomba itself is already an urban dance, but that's beyond the scope of this video. So why am I making the video? There's a lot of fighting that's been going on in our community over the past 2 years, 2, 3, 4 years, and it's become very tiresome to, I think, everyone involved, between people who like urban and people who don't. Now, the reason for the fighting, well, there's one group of people who feel like some of the more unsavory things that have happened as urban's become more popular, such as the sexualization of the dance, things like that, is an insult to the culture, which is a fair concern. Though that's more of a statement on some of the things that have been happening in that community rather than urban itself. Then you have people who basically can't make money off of urban because they can't do it well enough to sell it. So they want to try to reduce demand. Even, sometimes by directly attacking urban artists, sometimes by talking crap about it behind closed doors. Sometimes you'll have people who will, pretend to like it publicly and then try to take shots behind closed doors. You'll have people who will talk crap about it one day, and then when they have a chance to make money off of it, they're okay with it. And then as soon as the opportunity to make money off of it goes, knock it again. And then the last group of people are just haters who are just knocking something they either can't do well or don't understand, which, although it's human nature, it's still not a good look. So in this video, because you have people who have been trying to speak on urban with authority, even though they've never taken a class, they don't know how to dance it, they don't understand it, but they're presuming to speak on it with authority, and therein they're spreading misinformation. So the purpose of this video is to give you guys who either don't know what urban is or want kind of a refresher or just a handy reference to let you know what urban is and what it's not, in our opinion, as people who've trained heavily in both Kizomba Semba and urban, and therefore we're in a position to really talk on, to a great extent, the similarities, the differences, things like that. So in this video, we're going to first cover a little bit of what urban is and what it's not. I'm going to do a little demonstration of Kizomba, and then Kizomba with a little bit of seasoning. We'll worry about labels later. Then a little bit more of a further explanation on why you see so much variation in urban dancers. And then finally, some solutions to end all the madness and nonsense and fighting. Because it's one thing to complain and fight and do all that. It's another to actually offer feasible solutions. So, what makes urban urban? Do you have to wear a certain uniform? Like you see the leggings with the midriff, or the guys with the long hooded sweaters, or shirts tied around here, the caps. Do you have to wear the uniform you see a lot of people wearing to be an urban dancer? No. You can wear what you want. Like in anything else, right? You can wear what you want. Do you have to be, a stiff, robotic, wonky kind of, what I jokingly refer to as RoboCop? Do you have to be a RoboCop to be an urban dancer? No. And to be fair, urban doesn't have a monopoly on RoboCops. There are RoboCops on the Kizomba Semba side as well. So no, you don't have to be a RoboCop. In fact, I prefer that nobody would be a RoboCop, but to each his own. Do you have to have like a serious face, every time you dance? A brooding kind of? No. In fact, I like to smile even when I'm dancing urban. It's okay to smile, guys. Now, of course, the reason people smile is, sometimes they're very concentrated on their leading and following, things like that. But one thing I do find funny is that a lot of urban dancers tend to have a lot more serious face than Kizomba Semba dancers do. It's kind of funny, but yeah. Do you have to do the penguin? Do you have to penguin? Do you have to penguin to dance urban? No. There are a lot of penguins in the urban community, but you don't have to penguin if you don't want to penguin. It's up to you. Do you have to do a lot of moves and tricks to be an urban dancer? No. Although you do see a lot of urban dancers doing a lot of moves and tricks, just like you see a lot of Semba show dancers doing a lot of moves and tricks. It's kind of the flip side of the same coin. You have to be a disconnected dancer. You have to dance with a big disconnection to be an urban dancer. No. I personally, in fact, don't like being disconnected. I prefer to have a nice connection, whether I'm dancing Kizomba, Semba, or urban. In fact, if you know how to dance in that connected way, it doesn't really matter what style you're dancing. You'll be able to dance anything connected. So it's really up to the individual, whether they can dance in a connected manner or whether they like to dance in a connected manner. It's really up to you and whoever you're dancing with. It's not a statement on the style. So now that we've talked about what urban is not, let's talk about what it is. And in our opinion, from what we've seen and all the training that we've undergone, what ties all these styles together are two things, only two things. It has nothing to do with what you wear, stiff robotic movement, penguining, disconnected movement. That's not what it's about. It's about two things. One, an expanded musicality toolbox. Two, an openness to fusion and creativity. Now, notice I said openness, not necessity. You don't have to fuse, and you don't have to do a lot of moves and tricks or make up new steps to be an urban dancer. But the musicality, that is the defining characteristic. An expanded musicality toolbox. So I'll say it again. Urban is defined by an expanded musicality toolbox and an openness, but not a necessity, to fuse and be creative. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that there's not creativity in Kizomba and Semba. What I'm saying is that the creativity that you see in urban is creating steps that you wouldn't necessarily do in Kizomba Semba, although I have seen moves and steps that would work equally well on the Semba show performance or on an Urban Kids demo. So, take that as you will. So now that we've gone over what it is, now we're going to, as my mom would say, I'm gonna show you better than I can tell you. Now, usually in my case, that would happen before I got my butt whooped. In this case, we're just gonna kind of do a little demo for you guys. First, we're going to dance Kizomba, and then we're gonna dance Kizomba, but with a little bit of seasoning added. No need to label it as of yet, but I just want you to watch it and pay attention and try to see what the similarities are and also the differences, okay? Hey guys, before we show you the difference between Kizomba and what we'll call for now Kizomba with a little bit of seasoning added, it's important to touch on the music, as the music is what inspired what is now called urban. Now, it's very important for me to put an exclamation point on the fact that urban has no cultural connection with Kizomba, no cultural connection with Semba, no cultural connection with Angola, which is part of the reason why many of them don't like it, because they feel no connection to it. However, urban was inspired by certain genres of music that were created by Palops. There is no urban music genre as of yet. The music that inspired what is now called urban was already in existence. It doesn't come from France, even though a lot of people think that, the music comes from France. No. However, the urban dance styles did come from France. In fact, it was created in the beginning as just a personal style of a Congolese gentleman and his partner who were just developing their own personal style and interpreting certain types of music that were already in existence, namely tarraxinha, guerozuk, and then remixes and instrumentals. Remixes and instrumentals, you could probably also call them tarraxinha, many people do, but I'll show you the difference. So I'll play a little bit of each. So first, the first type of music, tarraxinha. Now understand, this type of music, this genre's been around for decades, okay? The genre is nothing new, okay? So I'll just play you a relatively recent tarraxinha. Many of you might have heard this song. It's very popular with urban dancers. But what if I told you that this song was created by an Angolan kid living in Lisbon? Yeah, it's not from France. So much of the music that is associated with urban It's created by palop musicians, which is why some of the fighting and stuff really doesn't make as much sense. You know, this is a style of dance created by an African, dance to music created by Africans. And yet there's all this fighting and stuff going on. Sometimes it's just misunderstanding. So that's tarraxinha. Now, there are tarraxinhas that are decades old. This one's relatively recent. Then I mentioned remixes and instrumentals. Now, I'll play a remix for you. Technically, remixes are still tarraxinha. They're still in that genre. But, you know, it's a remix, so there's a little subgenre, I guess you could say. And this is an example of a remix. I got broads in Atlanta. Right? It's a remix of a rap song. Right? So that's a remix. Then we'll have instrumentals. Now, many tarraxinhas are already instrumentals, but that one that I played, the first one had a little bit of words in it. So I'm going to play you one that doesn't have any words. This is also in France called douceur, means sweet, and you'll see why in a second. Right? It's real soft, and when you dance, if you dance in an urban style on this, you would dance in a very sweet, smooth manner, right? That's douceur. I might be saying it wrong, my French isn't perfect, but you know. And then the last type of music I'll play is ghetto zouk. Now, ghetto zouk music is often tied with tarraxinha because much of ghetto zouk music has tarraxinha rhythm. So often people lump them together as ghetto zouk and tarraxinha. Now, there are tarraxinhas that are not ghetto zouk, but most ghetto zouk music has a tarraxinha rhythm. So they're often lumped together, as I mentioned. So here's an example of a ghetto zouk. This one's from a few years ago. Good energy on it. Right, so good energy. Boom. So those are some of the types of music that urban dancers dance to. Now understand that in these genres, it doesn't mean that every song in each genre will be something that urban dancers will like. But those are the genres that currently urban dancers are dancing to. Now, there, of course, are musicians who are coming up with new sounds. Some of them are calling their music urban or urban kids. Now, if you're an artist, then you can call your music whatever you want. But pretty much all the music now that is being danced to by urban dancers can fit in one of these categories. Even newer subgenres like zouk bass and, you know, tarraxo, future tarraxo, things like this, they're still under the tarraxinha umbrella, okay? So that's a little primer on the music. And then next we're gonna show you the difference between Kizomba and Kizomba with a little bit of seasoning. So, welcome back. So, you've seen the two clips. You've seen us dancing Kizomba, and you've seen us dancing Kizomba with a little bit of seasoning. Now, what would you say we were dancing in the second video? Is it Kizomba Well, our posture didn't change, our movement didn't change, our connection didn't change, but it was a little different. Our musicality was a little bit different, and at the end we did add a move that you wouldn't see in Kizomba Semba. So what would you call this? Now, this is the problem that in the beginning started all the fighting and the confusion, because it's clearly Kizomba. Because, I mean, you take out everything that's Kizomba, you're only stuck with the move at the end. But it is different enough that if I'm a teacher and I'm teaching this, I shouldn't just say Kizomba, because then you would think, oh, Kizomba, I can go to Angola and dance this way in the club. If you did, they'd look at you crazy, right? So it's different. And this is why it started being called New Style, French Style, things like that. So that's basically how what is now called urban got started. That's also what it is at its core. It's Kizomba with an additional musicality toolbox and an openness to fusion and creativity. Yeah? So there are, of course, people, especially folks who are in the newest generation of urban dancers, and they would look at the video and say, that's not urban. But if you don't think it's urban, then my question to you is why? And if it has anything to do with the look, well, then I encourage you to look a little deeper. Because it's more than likely you've been looking at videos on YouTube and you think that looking that robotic or, stiff kind of way is a necessity to dance urban, and it's not. You can, in fact, keep your Kizomba Semba movement and connection and keep everything else mostly the same, except in times where you'll be doing certain techniques that you wouldn't do in Kizomba or techniques that you need a little more space. But that just depends on the moves that you want to do with your partner. It's a case-by-case scenario, not a statement on the style, okay? So in order to dance urban at its highest potential, there is an additional skill set required to express the musicality. But at its core, it is just a style of Kizomba with added seasoning, right? At its highest level, in our opinion. So if it's not a separate dance, why does it look so different on YouTube when you Google urban or urban kids or whatever? Why does it look so different from Kizomba? Well, that is usually because of one of two reasons. Either dance background or foundation or lack thereof of the individual dancer, or personal preference of the individual dancer. There's a lot of variation in the way urban looks depending on who's dancing. Often you can see a huge difference between folks who have a very strong Kizomba Semba Afro foundation and those who don't. The flow, especially the circular flow, smoothness, and body movement of someone with a strong foundation is markedly different from those who don't have it. And even if you can't see it, because sometimes it's not as easy to see if you don't have a trained eye, when you dance with people who have the foundation, who don't, you'll feel a huge difference. In fact, those who have a strong foundation in Kizomba, Semba, and Afro tend to feel a lot better. Now, I'm not saying that there's nobody who moves well in the urban camp and that everybody who doesn't like urban, who prefers Kizomba Semba moves better. No, like I said, there's Robocops in urban and there's Robocops in Kizomba Semba too. But the foundation I'm talking about is African Dance Foundation. So just because you are a traditionalist doesn't necessarily mean that you have it. But there are more people over here who have it than people over here, because if you only dance urban but never learn Kizomba, then you're missing a lot in your dance, which what I called in a previous video, the spoon with a hole in it. Yeah, that. So foundation or personal preference. Now, there are some people who never learn Kizomba and Semba, and that's why they move so stiff and wonky. There are some people who just like it. There are some people who learn the proper movement, but accentuated it. And that's kind of how the penguin thing started. There are people who do a little penguin, but they have the proper movement. They just add a little bit to it, and therefore they do a little bit of an accent. So when you take the bass and then you add a little seasoning to it, that's how it started. But there are a lot of other people who don't know how to move, and that's why they're penguining. They're trying to mimic what they've seen other people do, people who actually can dance Kizomba, and they're trying to mimic it. And this is what happens when you learn primarily from YouTube. All right. So you have people who either started learning Kizomba and stopped too soon, or never learned Kizomba, Semba, or any African dance at all. There are a lot of people in the community who have background in, say, Latin, modern dance, things like that. People who are talented dancers who can move, but don't yet know how to move in an African manner. So, of course, and I'll repeat this at the end, I encourage everybody, even if you like urban, learn Kizomba, learn Semba, learn anything Afro that you can do. And I'll tell you why in a little bit. Part of the other reason is there's a lot of fusion going on. Because like I said, urban, they're open to fusion and creativity. So you have people who are being creative and artistic and making up new steps and techniques and things like that. So, of course, as people are being creative, it might look different than what you're used to seeing in Kizomba, right? Now, as far as fusion, I'm a big fan of fusion when you know what you're fusing, right? Sometimes fusion becomes a kind of a stopgap to fill in the gaps in your dance with things from other dances because you don't have a strong foundation. But with a strong foundation, fusion can be an awesome thing. There are those that say that urban is not a style of Kizomba, it's a completely separate dance. And I understand why some people would say that, right? If you don't understand what it is, you know, given what's on YouTube these days, you know, if I'm someone, for instance, of the culture, like an Angolan, and I'm looking at, especially, you know, all that kind of stuff, right? I don't want to be associated with that, right? I'm like, that's sexual, that's sexualizing. No, right? I get it. But that is not a statement on urban. That's a statement on the individual background and preference of that dancer. Okay, urban doesn't have to be sexual, just like Kizomba and Semba doesn't have to be. If you're dancing with someone and you feel a sensual connection with that person, you know, you can add the tarraxinha, you can do things like that. Same with urban. It's an individual preference or background. So here's my question. If Kizomba and urban are completely separate dances, instead of, as I've said, urban being a style of Kizomba, then you could take out everything that's Kizomba from urban and you'd still be left with a dance. If I'm an urban dancer with a strong Kizomba foundation and you take out everything that's urban out of my dance, I still have Kizomba because Kizomba is the base. If I am an urban dancer and I take out everything that comes from Kizomba, from saidas and the connection and everything on down. If I take out everything Kizomba, I don't have a dance left. All I have are some sporadic steps and tricks, and that's about it. Because Kizomba is what holds everything together. Again, it's like steak and seasoning or cake and icing. If you take away the seasoning, you still have your nice steak. Some people may not like the seasoning that you put on. They prefer their steak with just, you know, some butter, a little salt and pepper, and they're good. They may not like the extra seasoning, right? You take your cake, some people don't like icing on their cake. You take away the icing, you still have cake. It's still nice, it's still filling, you'll still enjoy it. But if you take away the steak and only have seasoning, it might taste nice, but it's not filling. If you take away the cake, you still have the icing, it still tastes sweet, but it's not filling because there's nothing holding it together. That's what Kizomba is. And that's what I mean when I say that Kizomba and urban aren't separate dances. What this also means is that if you want to be a high-level urban dancer, you have to learn Kizomba and Semba. There's no getting around it. The most elite urban dancers in the world, the ones who put the biggest smiles on their partners' faces, long term, are people with a strong foundation. So you might be able to do a lot of cool moves and tricks, and you might entertain your dance partners for a little while, but I promise you, even the most hardcore urban girl, especially the teachers that I know, you will often find them in the Kizomba room. Because nobody wants to dance all night long with people who only do tricks and can't move, who don't understand how to connect. And that comes from learning Kizomba. There's a big difference between urban dancers who have a strong Kizomba Semba Afro foundation and those who don't. And I know this from personal experience because when I first started dancing what was called then the French style, I didn't have as strong of a Kizomba Semba Afro foundation. I had just really started, you know, and when I started teaching, I realized after looking around at people like Curtis and Enuel, and how they dance, and then trying to mimic them or trying to dance the way they do and realize that there are things they could do that I couldn't. The reason is because they had a stronger foundation than I did. So I remember one of the first blog posts I ever wrote, I mentioned and I talked about the need to learn samba, kizomba to develop a strong foundation. Because what I noticed is over time, as I focused on samba and kizomba, as I focused on, Afro like soukous, which is probably my favorite, Afro dance right now, my body became conditioned, my movement became way better. My lead and follow got better, my musicality. Now, of course, I also was learning, urban technique as well, because there are techniques in urban that you don't do in kizomba. So there is a few more technical aspects to dancing urban that you'll need to learn as well. But I found that it became easier for me to execute and especially express the music in interesting ways, the stronger my foundation got. And so now in my urban, I'm able to express the music pretty much in any way that I desire at this point, because I've been working all this time on foundation. So I encourage all of you, whether you like urban or you don't like urban, focus on that foundation, that circular flow, the movement that comes from learning African dance. Now, like I said, not everybody who's a traditionalist can move well. So the foundation that I'm talking about isn't the steps, it's the movement. But that comes from African dance foundation, whether you like urban or you don't like urban. So I'm very happy to have my beautiful and intelligent and smart and successful and amazing, trying to get some points, partner Monica K to share her views on the issue from a follower's perspective. So I'm gonna get out of here and let her talk to you guys.
Ooh. Okay, from a follower's perspective, when follows take classes, whether it's kizomba, samba, or urban, and I've definitely taken my fair share of classes in all these three things, you really actually learn a lot of the same techniques and principles. Maybe the teachers don't know that because they don't cross-train, but the whole goal of being a good follower is to be able to follow any lead. And so when you're at a kizomba party, it's not like salsa where someone's gonna approach you and be like, oh, do you dance on one or on two? Do you dance urban or do you dance kizomba? It doesn't really work that way. They just ask you and then you need to dance with them and you need to follow them. And so from my perspective, there aren't enough skills that differ between these dances to make them different dances. Also, you're dancing all these different genres in the same kizomba party. And if lead asks you to dance and the song is more of a kizomba, but then it changes into a ghetto zouk song afterwards and he decides to be quote unquote more urban, there really isn't a change when I'm dancing with many leads in posture or anything that makes it different enough to say that it's a different dance. Maybe in their style and interpretation of the music, but in the actual steps of it, not too much for me. Caveat here though, this is when leads have a strong kizomba samba foundation. This is such an important caveat because it is so telling as a follow. You can tell if they don't have a foundation, whether someone's dancing kizomba or urban kiz. If their foundation is weak, you feel it. They feel weird and the flow isn't there in terms of musicality or interpretation. The second thing also that I wanted to say is in terms of female styling, there's so many different variations when it comes to urban, even when you see samba, even when you see kizomba, that it can't be the styling that determines if something's a new dance, because the styling itself is also just a personal interpretation. And that's why a lot of times they say, oh, this is a new dance because the follow is more, straight-legged or they're more stiff. Well, that's just the dancer. It doesn't really necessarily mean that it's the dance. And those are some things to think about as well. So back to my partner, who is amazing and smart and wonderful and nice and amazing.
Handsome?
Oh yeah, and handsome.
That's right. Thank you, Monica. But one caveat I want to add from a lead's perspective. As a follow, it is important to be able to follow anyone. But as a lead, if you're dancing or trying to dance urban with a girl who clearly isn't really good at following, don't try to do every trick that you learned or saw on YouTube with her. Take it easy. If you're, for instance, if you're at a party, you're dancing with, say, a 45-year-old Angolan, maybe don't try to do the latest urban move. Maybe stick to Kizomba.
But I mean, that's the same thing. Don't try to do the latest semba tricks you did. Same thing.
Same thing.
So yeah, duh.
Dance with your partner. So on to our next thoughts. So I mentioned in the beginning of the video that I'm going to provide some solutions on how to end the fighting and bring people together. At least for those who want to bring people together and have a unified community. There are people out there, some who've been actually very refreshingly open about the fact that they don't really want unity or feel that it's needed. So for people who want to keep people separate, then this isn't for you. But for those of you who want to actually have a unified community, and for what I've seen, that's the vast majority of Kizomba dancers and urban dancers, this is how to do it. Understand that as urban is only a style of Kizomba, you have to learn Kizomba to dance it at an elite level. That means learning Kizomba, that means learning semba, that means, and when I say semba, I mean semba social, not semba show. I'm not talking about all the tricks and the hanging on the girls and all that. No, you don't need that unless you want to do shows, and it's fun to learn, but you don't need that. That's not the most important thing. Semba's not about moves and tricks. Learning semba, learning Kizomba, learning any afro you can get your hands on. The better you condition your body to move like an African, the better you'll be able to express the musicality of urban. If you're a teacher primarily, you need to be investing heavily in learning Kizomba, semba, and any African dance you can. If you're a student, put pressure on your teachers to actually learn. There are a lot, especially on the urban side, who have a very weak foundation. So ask your teachers, who have they trained with, not only in urban, but also Kizomba and semba. If they can't tell you anything, or they're hemming and hawing, or they can't really tell you the last time they've done a private lesson with a Kizomba semba teacher, then I'm not going to say don't learn from them, but you're going to need to supplement your education. And as money, of course, for many of us, money is tight. If your foundation is not very strong, you're better off, in my opinion, spending your money on learning foundation. That doesn't necessarily mean that because you only do semba that you have a strong foundation. Like I said, there are robocops and stiff dancers who can't move on both sides of the ideological divide. But you want to focus on African dance foundation. Then, either concurrently or afterwards, you can start working on the urban musicality, learning from ideally urban teachers who either have learned from the pioneers of urban or are the pioneers of urban, or people who also dance Kizomba. In my opinion, learning from people who dance Kizomba, semba, and urban is your best bet. For folks who are saying it's a separate dance, stop it. Especially if you don't dance urban. If you don't know what it is, stop saying it's a separate dance. Because if you say that, this is basically what you're telling people who like urban more than Kizomba. You're telling them it's a separate dance, so you don't need to learn Kizomba or semba. You can just learn urban. Now, if you, again, like I said, if your goal is to keep people separate, then fine, you get what you want. And best believe, folks, the people out there who want to keep the people separate, they don't want the urban people learning Kizomba semba. They want to keep them separate in hopes that eventually the urban community will implode when the level of social dancing goes down. And this is what happens when you don't have a foundation. You have a bunch of robocops in a room doing a bunch of tricks that they don't understand, and with very little musicality to tie it together, very little connection and flow. And especially for the leads, the ladies, they'll get tired of it after a while and they'll run over to the Kizomba room. I've seen it happen time and time again, okay? Now, like I said, urban doesn't have a monopoly on Robocop, but you don't want to be Robocop when you dance. Or at least you don't want to be forced to be Robocop because you don't know how to move properly, okay? So yeah, the people who are separatists, they want the urban community to implode and die. Don't let that happen. Make sure that whether you like urban more or Kizomba semba, you work on that African dance foundation. So the next time somebody tells you it's a separate dance, ask them to demonstrate their competency in urban and see what they say. Ask them who they've trained with in urban. See what they say. If they can't answer that, then you basically have somebody pulling a trump. And it's not a good look. So like I said, our goal in doing this is to bring people together. It's to create the kind of dance community that will last for 20 years. And you can't do that without excellent social dancing. And the social dancing will suffer with a lack of foundation. So even if you want to be the next urban sensation, if you want to be an elite urban dancer like the pioneers, you need to work on that foundation, because you'll find that as your foundation gets stronger, you will get to a point where, especially if you can develop an even stronger African dance foundation than the creators of urban have, then you'll be able to express musicality even better, and maybe you'll create your own style. But you can't do that without the proper foundation. Kizomba is not about moves and tricks, whatever flavor you prefer. It's about connection, flow, musicality. And this comes with foundation. Hey guys, so we're here sharing our final thoughts. So in summary, though urban has no cultural connection to Kizomba, to Semba, or to Angola, it is most certainly a style of Kizomba inspired by certain genres that were already in existence. And it's marked by two main characteristics. One, an expanded musicality toolset. Two, an openness to fusions and creativity. Now that doesn't mean that there's no fusions or no creativity. Well, not as much fusion, but there's no creativity in Kizomba and Semba. There is, but the fusion and creativity you see in urban is going to be different sometimes. So because it is a style of Kizomba, it's very, very important to learn Kizomba and Semba. And the variation that you will often see in the whole urban community is usually based on one of two things, either the lack of foundation or personal preference, right? So since urban is a style of Kizomba, particularly if you're a teacher who's teaching people urban, but you haven't learned Kizomba, Semba, or you're not committed to learning Kizomba, Semba, and you're not teaching your students to do the same, then you're not only doing yourself a disservice, but you're doing your students a disservice as well. You need to commit to learning proper foundation. Doing so will do a lot to help heal this divide that's currently existing between mainly people of the culture and people who don't like urban and people who love it. So that's what the urban lovers, that's what you can do to help. For the non-urban lovers, first, it's important for me to say something. Not liking urban doesn't make you a hater. Having a preference doesn't make you a hater. Even being a hardcore traditionalist doesn't make you a hater. But being a hater makes you a hater. So please, govern yourselves accordingly and comport yourself with dignity and respect. If you want people to respect you, you have to treat others with respect as well. Please keep an open mind. I know that's going to be difficult for some of you, but understand that, like people will say, in art and music and dance, things will change over time. Now, the difference between what I'll call an evolution, which doesn't mean better, it just means you're adding something, and a mutation. An evolution is where you have a good foundation and you add some things. Doesn't mean that you have to add things. Some people don't like the extra seasoning. But there's a difference between adding something and taking things away because you can't execute them correctly. That's a mutation. And the variation that you see in the community is a result of that. There's far too much mutation going on and not enough evolution. If you're going to evolve something, if you're going to fuse it, you need to know what it is. So this is the message that you want to send to people. Stop telling people that urban is a separate dance. Doing that is only giving those who don't have a proper foundation an excuse to stay where they are and keep mutating and you know, all the foolishness that's going on. Now, this is if you are not a separatist. If your goal is to divide the community, then that's exactly what you'll want to tell them. But if you're a separatist, you're probably not going to appreciate this message because we're all about unity. Yeah. So understand that the future of Kizomba is in diversity, is in inclusion, is in unity. But you can't have unity without respect on both sides. So let's make a huge effort to respect each other, to seek to understand first and then criticize. And in so doing, let's build a quality community that will change the world and last until our great grandkids are dancing and even longer. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.